Slightly unclear how far along Kate is, maybe 8 to 12 weeks, so we're looking at a new royal baby sometime in the spring, April or May.
Under chandeliers burning like captive stars, the palace dinner unfolded in rehearsed perfection, until Catherine leaned in, breath steady, voice low. One sentence, barely above a whisper, snapped every fork midair and sent a chill across the table. Queen Camilla's smile tightened. Courtiers traded glances. Protocol froze where it stood. The evening built to showcase unity shattered into quiet thunder as Catherine revealed the truth about a secret fourth pregnancy, turning the ceremony into a crisis.
The Duchess of Cambridge looked happy, healthy, and energetic. Every time she appears in public, she is scrutinized for any sign of a possible pregnancy. Touching her stomach protectively, she knew, but hoped to keep it secret for a few more weeks.
So, how did a single whisper rewrite the night? And everyone was listening. Let's dive into the details. Catherine's shocking pregnancy confession. The royal banquet was carefully designed to showcase unity, stability, and the strength of tradition. The chandeliers glistened, the silverware shone, and every guest knew their role in the grand performance of royal pageantry. Yet beneath the polished surface, the air was heavy with something unspoken. It wasn't the laughter of dignitaries or the scripted toasts that captured attention that night. It was the quiet, unsettling tension that seemed to cling to the walls. From the moment the dinner began, it was clear that something unexpected was about to unfold. King Charles, though determined to be present, appeared frail and weary. His illness lingered like a shadow, softening his once assured presence. Each smile felt labored, each gesture a reminder of his vulnerability. At his side, Prince William moved with a steady confidence, quietly stepping into the role that fate was slowly preparing for him. He carried himself with calm assurance, but behind his composure was an unmistakable sense of watchfulness, as though he too anticipated a shift that was coming. Princess Anne, sharp and observant as ever, sat like a silent guardian of the room. Her eyes, piercing and precise, caught subtleties others ignored. The nervous tightening of hands, the fleeting glances exchanged between family members, and above all, Catherine's unusual demeanor. It was not Charles, William, or even Anne who held the power that evening. It was Catherine, seated gracefully, yet carrying an invisible storm. Her smile was polite, her nods measured, her exchanges courteous, but there was no light behind them. Guests sensed it too. Even those most accustomed to the choreography of royal dinners found themselves unsettled by her quiet gravity. This wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't mere distraction. It was a heaviness, something deeply personal, weighing down on her every move. Then, midway through the evening, came the moment that broke the fragile spell of the ceremony. As a senior figure stood to honor the king, Catherine lifted her glass. All eyes followed the familiar ritual, but instead of sipping, she lowered it, resting it firmly on the table. The sound of crystal against polished wood echoed louder than it should have, sharp enough to silence nearby conversations. Her hands remained steady, almost deliberate, as though grounding herself against a force threatening to erupt. The room stiffened. Conversations faltered. William turned toward her, his expression taut, his eyes filled with recognition and quiet fear. This was no accident. This was the moment he had dreaded, yet knew must eventually come. Catherine's gaze met his, not in hesitation, but with a steady resolve. The look between them told a silent story of months spent carrying a truth they had guarded fiercely, a truth too heavy to conceal any longer. For weeks, whispers had already haunted the palace corridors. Catherine's absences from public engagements were noticed. Doctors arrived in the early hours through hidden gates, their presence disguised as routine. Palace aides crafted vague excuses, fatigue, minor illness, the burden of responsibility. But the tabloids remained restless. Stories swirled of failing health, marital strain, and even tension with Queen Camilla. None of it was true, yet every rumor edged dangerously close to revealing what Catherine herself had struggled to contain. Behind those walls, she carried the unbearable strain of secrecy. Her nights were long and sleepless, her days filled with the weight of silence. William urged patience, warning that revealing the truth too soon could invite scandal, that one misstep might endanger not just her, but the family's future. And yet Catherine knew she could not remain voiceless forever. The silence was its own kind of torment, one that chipped away at her spirit. The grand dinner, designed to project royal stability, became her chosen battlefield. Among lords, dignitaries, and her own family, she resolved that the truth could no longer be buried beneath whispers. She would not let the rumors define her. She would not allow secrecy to turn strength into weakness. So when Catherine finally rose from her seat, the hall seemed to freeze in anticipation. Every goblet paused, every fork hovered, and the soft hum of polite laughter dissolved into silence. She stood steady, though her hands trembled faintly, and when her voice broke the quiet, it was with 5 simple words. I was pregnant again. Those words struck like thunder. The room that moments earlier had been alive with ritual and formality collapsed into a stunned hush. For years, Catherine had been the embodiment of restraint, a figure who never revealed more than duty demanded. Yet in that instant, she shattered the silence, reclaiming her truth in the most public of ways. The grandeur of the evening dissolved, leaving only her revelation echoing across the table, a truth more powerful than any carefully rehearsed speech. It was not only the pregnancy itself that shocked, but the courage in how she chose to reveal it. And as those words settled into the stunned silence, they set in motion something no royal protocol could control, the shock reaction it led to. But what could possibly follow a revelation so bold? And how did it leave the palace reeling in disbelief? Stay with us, because what happened next will leave you questioning everything. Catherine's truth leaves royals stunned. The room froze in an instant. A silence so sharp it seemed to cut through the golden glow of the chandeliers. Camilla's hand, steady only moments before, trembled as her wine glass slipped. Scarlet liquid spilled across the polished oak table, staining the linen like blood on snow. Her face drained of composure, and for once, the queen consort could not mask her shock. Catherine's words were not just personal. To Camilla, they were a direct strike, a declaration that the woman she had once dismissed as meek and compliant was now wielding a power she could neither predict nor control. At the head of the table, King Charles paled visibly. His health, already a subject of whispers across the nation, seemed to falter under the weight of Catherine's revelation. His shoulders slumped, his lips parted in disbelief, as though the air itself had abandoned him. This was not a mere family confession. It was a dagger twisted into the heart of monarchy itself. For Charles, the thought of another heir, another hidden truth surfacing at this fragile stage of his reign, was almost unbearable. He stared into the distance, eyes hollow, his weakness laid bare before guests who had never been meant to witness such vulnerability. Princess Anne, ever the watchful sentinel and Catherine's quiet ally, was the first to react. She didn't speak, but her expression was a weapon in its own right. Her head turned sharply toward William, her gaze narrowing with unspoken demand. Was this true? Had Catherine truly revealed such a secret without the palace's iron grip of approval? Anne's silence screamed louder than words, filled with both shock and something dangerously close to admiration. William met her stare, though he said nothing. He didn't have to. His jaw tightened, his grip on Catherine's hand turned rigid, and that single gesture spoke volumes. He had carried this truth beside her, and now, together, they had chosen to expose it. Their defiance was united. Their silence was stronger than any spoken defense. Around them, the other guests shifted uneasily, their bodies betraying their discomfort. Some leaned closer, whispering furiously, while others sat stiff, caught between loyalty and disbelief. This was not how revelations in the royal family were made. Tradition demanded careful crafting by advisors, messages wrapped in perfect wording and slowly fed to the public. But Catherine had torn through the script. She had sidestepped the courtiers, shattered protocol, and laid bare a truth that could never be controlled. What was meant to be a night of elegance, filled with polished toasts and royal ritual, had erupted into something else entirely, a storm of vulnerability, grief, and rebellion. Yet Catherine herself remained unshaken. Her voice didn't falter. Her expression held steady, and the calmness that radiated from her seemed almost eerie, as if months of torment had hardened her into unyielding steel. She didn't cry, though the weight of sorrow hung in every word. She did not plead for understanding. Instead, her revelation carried the ache of loss, the defiance of a woman who refused to be silenced, and the resilience of someone who had carried her pain alone for too long. For years, the nation had believed Catherine was the mother of 3 heirs, her family the perfect symbol of royal continuity and stability. But behind the palace walls, beyond the reach of flashing cameras and curated headlines, another truth had existed. A 4th life, fragile and fleeting, had once been carried within her, a child who never stood beside George, Charlotte, and Louis, a child whose existence had been buried in silence before it could ever be celebrated by the world. The impact of her words pressed heavily upon every soul in the room. This was not a scandal, not the kind of drama that could be spun into polished press releases. It was grief, raw, unpolished, uncontainable. Catherine's voice carried the unspoken memories of nights filled with tears behind closed doors, of forced smiles at grand events, of the hollow emptiness she had been forced to hide beneath jeweled crowns and dazzling gowns. That mask of perfection, so carefully worn, cracked at last. And yet this revelation was not the end. It was only the beginning. What Catherine had laid bare was more than a confession. It was a warning, a tremor before a larger quake, the opening of a door to something far more dangerous than anyone at that table could have foreseen. Now comes William's role, his quiet strength, his steady presence, and the weight of duty pressing against his loyalty as a husband. His response could shape not only their future, but the monarchy itself. Stay tuned as we break down the details. The dinner where Catherine's truth shattered the palace. William's inner struggle was impossible to hide that evening. Every movement, every breath drawn beside Catherine carried the weight of 2 battles, his duty to the crown and his devotion to the woman who shared his life. The monarchy demanded silence, demanded composure, but within the hidden walls of their private chambers, William had been Catherine's rock. He had held her during countless nights of grief, wiping tears no one else would ever see, even as the world expected him to project only strength. For him, her confession at that dinner table was more than revelation. It was release. Years of pain, carefully locked away, now burst into the open, unmasking the fragile facade of royal perfection. The secrecy had been absolute. The press, ever hungry for stories, had missed it completely. The palace machinery, so ruthless, so precise, had erased every trace. Each unexplained absence was given a polished excuse, every murmur of suspicion smothered before it could grow. To the public there were 3 heirs, 3 shining symbols of continuity. But Catherine's calm words told a different story. There had been a 4th, a child lost, unacknowledged, hidden away by silence so complete that even the most watchful eyes of the media had seen nothing. The revelation rippled across the room like a storm breaking over calm seas. Stiff-backed dignitaries and seasoned courtiers froze in place, their masks of composure slipping. Some lowered their heads, others blinked back tears. What Catherine shared was not scandal. It was raw humanity. The pain of a mother forced to grieve in the shadows while wearing tiaras and flawless gowns for the cameras. For years, she had lived behind a mask, smiling for a nation, while silently mourning the child she could never hold. But now her strength lay not in concealment, but in the bravery to speak. Yet her words carried more than sorrow. They carried defiance. For months, whispers seated by Camilla's circle had slithered through palace corridors. Suggestions that Catherine was fragile, claims she was too delicate to bear the crushing duty of queenship, and hints that she lacked the strength to stand beside William as queen. Each rumor was carefully disguised as concern, but sharpened with venom meant to wound. And wound they did. Catherine endured them in silence, until that night. With her revelation, she fought back not with anger, but with truth. What had been painted as weakness was transformed into power. No longer William's quiet shadow, Catherine became the voice that shattered silence. Anne's steady gaze from across the table only reinforced the moment, her quiet approval lending Catherine the strength of royal steel. But if Catherine's words carried grace, William's fury gave them fire. When Camilla dared to dismiss the confession as untimely, William's restraint cracked. His sharp defense silenced the room, making it clear her truth would never be buried again. The dinner, once ceremonial, had become a battlefield of queens. Catherine stood tall, Camilla rattled, the tension thick enough to choke. Yet one question lingered. Why did Catherine choose this exact moment to speak out? Could timing itself be the key to everything that followed? Stay tuned. The revelation that redefined the royal succession. The monarchy had stepped into a fragile new chapter, one where silence was no longer a shield, but a dangerous crack that could break the entire foundation. Catherine's decision to speak wasn't just an act of courage or grief. It was a carefully chosen moment, tied directly to the survival of the crown. What she revealed that night was deeply personal, yet it instantly carried political weight. It wasn't only about a child lost. It was about securing the Windsor bloodline, making sure no shadow of doubt could creep into the line of succession. For too long, her silence had allowed whispers to gather strength. Rumors spread in hushed corners, twisting absence into weakness and weakness into opportunity. Camilla's growing influence was already a threat many dared not name. But in the darkness of palace gossip, it was imagined stretching even further, into questions of inheritance, into subtle speculation about who might stand nearest to the throne in years to come. Catherine saw it clearly. Silence was no longer safety. It was surrender. She understood that in a family where every word, every birth, every decision carried history's weight, secrecy was a double-edged sword. If she didn't control the story, someone else would. And once it slipped from her hands, her pain could be used as a weapon, reshaped into proof of fragility, or even incompetence. That was the danger she could no longer risk. By tearing the veil herself, she denied her enemies the chance to use it against her. William's fury, long restrained, now burned openly. For months, he had endured half-spoken comments in corridors, guarded conversations, and suggestions whispered with calculated audacity. Some dared imagine Camilla's grandson an outsider to the Windsor line, standing closer to the throne than tradition allowed. To William, it was betrayal disguised as idle speculation. Hearing Catherine claim the truth out loud fueled his anger, turning it from quiet restraint into a visible fire etched across every look he gave, every clipped word he spoke. Catherine's strength, however, wasn't in anger, but in precision. Her words struck like a blade, yet carried the weight of mourning. She didn't just grieve, she defended. She claimed her lost child's place in the royal story, anchoring it firmly within the line of succession. By doing so, she sealed cracks before Camilla's ambitions could slip through. What once seemed like sorrow became a fortress built around her children's rightful future. Even Princess Anne, so often unmoved by sentiment, offered silent acknowledgement. A single nod, slight but deliberate, signaled her recognition of Catherine's resolve. To those watching closely, that gesture carried weight. Anne had lived her life hardened by duty, unbent by weakness. For her to align silently with Catherine meant one thing. Catherine's stance had the strength of history itself behind it. The atmosphere in the hall shifted sharply. What began as a dinner cloaked in ritual had become a declaration. Grief transformed into power, silence into defiance. Catherine's revelation wasn't just personal sorrow, it was a political act, binding her family's pain to the destiny of the monarchy. And as the echoes of her words still lingered in the stunned silence, attention turned to the one man whose reaction could tilt the balance entirely: King Charles' reaction. Now, how did he respond to a truth so raw, so defiant, and so impossible to ignore? Stay with us, because what followed next changed everything. The moment King Charles broke under Catherine's revelation. As Catherine's confession spilled into the grand dining hall, the atmosphere shifted so sharply it was almost physical. Guests, who moments earlier had been whispering over fine wine, now sat rigid, their eyes fixed on King Charles. He looked like a man crushed beneath an invisible weight, his hands gripping the table's edge as though it were his only anchor. His usually steady presence dissolved. The pale mask of his face told the story no words could. Catherine's truth hadn't just unsettled the family. It ripped open the very foundation of his fragile reign. The king, once seen as the fragile yet determined figure striving to hold the monarchy together, seemed hollow in this moment. His crown suddenly appeared too heavy, his authority fractured beyond repair. Whispers spread through the hall, not of admiration for the monarch's resilience, but of doubt, of collapse, of a dynasty unraveling before their eyes. In that silence, ghosts of the past returned. Diana's shadow hovered unspoken, yet undeniable, stirring painful memories of secrets, sorrow, and a woman silenced too soon. The guests could not help but compare the two women. Where Diana had been forced to endure in silence, Catherine refused to bow, her grief no longer hidden but sharpened into defiance. Charles sat caught in a web of impossible choices. On one side, Camilla seethed, her jaw locked tight, every breath betraying fury, silently commanding her husband to rise, to protect her honor, to strike back at Catherine's revelation. On the other side, William stood firm, his loyalty radiating as he clasped Catherine's hand. His silence wasn't weakness, it was solidarity, a declaration without words that her truth was also his. The king's hesitation trapped him between a wife demanding loyalty and a son embodying defiance. But the silence dragged on. That silence grew heavier than any royal decree, a declaration of its own. Guests saw it for what it was: surrender. A father unable to command his son, a husband incapable of calming his wife, a monarch powerless before his crown. The illusion of unity cracked wide open, replaced with the stench of division. Then Catherine's voice rose once more, calm yet unyielding. "I will no longer stay silent, no matter the cost." The words sliced through centuries of decorum, turning grief into rebellion. Her pain had transformed into power, and beside her, William's grip bound their futures together as an unbreakable front. And in that moment, the only sound louder than Catherine's defiance was Camilla's fury. But how far would she go to silence a rival who refused to bow. Stick around, because what followed next was nothing short of explosive. The outburst that exposed a fractured crown. Camilla did not remain silent. She tried to push back, framing Catherine's revelation as reckless, disruptive, even selfish. Yet the more she spoke, the clearer her desperation became. Her words lacked weight, her arguments empty, and with each attempt to dismiss Catherine, the room grew colder toward her. Guests who had once been cautious shifted further from Camilla's side, their sympathy drawn instead to Catherine's calm defiance. Where Camilla appeared rattled, Catherine stood unshaken. And in that stark contrast, the balance of power quietly slipped away from Camilla's grasp. Then, from the far end of the table, came a voice no one had expected, Princess Anne. She did not thunder or rage. She spoke softly, but her words carried the authority of a lifetime devoted to service and duty. Anne praised Catherine's courage, reminding the room that to speak truth in a place designed for silence demanded strength very few possessed. Her intervention cut through the tension like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time, Catherine's defiance had an elder's blessing, a stamp of legitimacy that even Camilla could not undermine. The response was immediate. Guests, emboldened by Anne's support and moved by Catherine's raw honesty, broke protocol and rose to their feet in applause. It was a startling breach of royal decorum, but in that moment, no one cared about rules. Their applause was not for Catherine the princess. It was for Catherine the woman who dared to bare her soul before the crown. The palace walls had never echoed with such defiance, and the sound carried far beyond that room. Yet this was no ending. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Whispers spread through corridors, aides rushed in panic, and Camilla began plotting her next move. But looming above it all was the frailty of King Charles's health, leaving a vacuum of leadership that William and Catherine now seemed destined to fill. And in the shadows of that night, Catherine's lost child became more than a memory. It became a symbol of defiance that threatened to reshape the monarchy's future forever. That was the night Catherine's truth rocked the palace, with Camilla's fury and bold defiance signaling change. What do you think will happen next behind closed doors? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.